Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone to the Careers in Tax Law panel sponsored by the ABA tax section. As a friendly reminder, law students can join the ABA and the tax section for free. I encourage everyone to consider joining the tax section and the Young Lawyers Forum, as well as the ABA. They're all great ways to network and to learn about tax law. And also note that the fall tax virtual meeting will be free for students as well. Now, a couple of notes about today's presentation. If you have friends or colleagues who were not able to make it today, it will be recorded and posted on the tax section's website. And you're free to ask questions during the panel using the chat feature in Zoom. Only the panelists will be able to see your questions, so please don't be shy. And I will try to ask those questions as they come up, and we'll also be sure to leave the last 15 minutes or so at the end to focus on those questions. I'm Prasanthi Paritala. I'm an associate at Davis & Harmon, and I'll be moderating today's panel. Let me briefly introduce each of our esteemed panelists. We have Judge Foley from the U.S. Tax Court, Chief Judge, Michael Desmond, Chief Counsel, the Internal Revenue Service, Tiffany Smith, Tax Counsel at the Senate Finance Committee, Diana Erbsen, Partner at DLA Piper, Alex Kugelman, the founder of Kugelman Law, and Brianne Sellier, Senior Manager at Crowe LLP. Thank you all for being here today. To give everyone some more background, I graduated law school without having taken a single tax class, and I practiced regulatory law in Colorado for about 4 years before deciding to get my tax LLM from the University of Denver. And then I clerked for Judge Paris at the tax court for 2 years, and now I'm an associate at Davis & Harmon here in DC, focusing on insurance tax. Now I'd like to turn to each of the panelists to give a more detailed description of your background and experience leading to where you are now. So if we can start with Chief Judge Foley.
Thank you, Prasanthi. Well, I became interested in tax as a college student. I took a macroeconomic policy course in my junior year. And I was studying economics and political science, and had a concentration in Black studies and public policy. And I took a class on macroeconomic policy, and for about a week they talked about tax policy, and in particular they talked about enterprise zones. And it was the first time that I could really see the interaction between the economic and our our political system. So I became fascinated with tax policy because it was really the first time I had a class that combined all of my interests. And I decided I wanted to be a tax attorney. Didn't know much about how I was going to get there, but after I graduated from college, I went to Berkeley and suffered through contracts and crim law and all that stuff, and finally got to my tax classes. And finished up at Berkeley and went to the Chief Counsel's office. At the time, they had a division called Legislation and Regulations Division, and I worked there drafting regulations in the estate and gift tax area and the excise tax area. While I was there, I went to Georgetown and got my LLM. I was at the IRS for about 3 years, and then I went to the Senate Finance Committee and worked on the Senate Finance Committee majority staff for 5.5 years. And my boss became Treasury Secretary. And I then moved to the Treasury Department and worked in the Treasury Department on designing tax legislation for the administration. I did that for about 3 years, and then I was appointed to the tax court. I've been on the tax court for 25 years now. And I've been chief judge for this is my 3rd year. I could go on, but I'll be brief because we've got a number of panelists.
Great, thank you, Mr. Desmond.
Sure, thank you. So my interest in tax sparked somewhat similar to Chief Judge Foley. I had, like many undergraduates, sort of thought of tax as a finance and accounting and a numbers-based exercise. I was an American history and political science undergrad, and just never navigated or gravitated toward the math and the science and the finance issues. Some econ, but certainly didn't get the introduction that Chief Judge Foley got in econ tax. For me, that came in law school, and tax is, at least in my school, was not a core class, not a required class, but a highly recommended elective class. So somewhere in the middle of the tax, introduction to tax course that I was taking, came to find out that tax is not all about numbers and accounting. Really, as Chief Judge Foley said, it's got a lot to do with public policy. And talking about some early issues, deductibility of expenses and fines and penalties under Section 162F and some other things, really highlighted for me early in my law school tax class that tax is a lot more about public policy than it is about putting numbers on a tax return and getting accounting issues taken care of. So that sparked an early interest in tax. Throughout law school, I took a number of other tax classes, corporate partnership, tax-exempt organizations, and continued to have an interest in that area. Coming out of law school, I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to commit to a technical tax career. So I did have the opportunity to clerk for a district court judge out in Los Angeles, Judge Liu, who still sits out in Los Angeles and remains a colleague and a friend and a mentor of mine. I spent a year clerking in the district court there and got some experience with a wide range of litigation issues, all the types of cases that are pending in district courts. At the time, I was thinking I would take the traditional path into a law firm and see where that led me. To his credit, and I will always credit him for this, Judge Liu steered me back toward Washington, D.C., where I'd gone to law school, and into the tax division of the Department of Justice. And having met with a number of folks from the Justice Department, realized that would be more of a litigating function, although it was the tax division. My career there would be as a litigator in tax cases, but really focused more on trial attorney work, not necessarily on tax work. And spent 5 years there, and in fact, that's what that experience was. A great experience at the Justice Department Tax Division. A lot of different cases. Back then, this is before the '98 Act, so a lot of it focused on collection work, on trust fund recovery penalty cases, jury trials in those cases. Really had a great experience doing that, but it wasn't the core substantive tax issues that many of us think of. It was really more focused on trials and litigation work, which was great, and I loved that experience. So I went in then to private practice for a few years, made partner at a boutique firm here in Washington, D.C., and thought my career path was set at that point, and then had the opportunity, sort of unexpected opportunity, to go to the Treasury Department. And like Chief Judge Foley, was able to spend some time in the Treasury Department, really turning my career more toward a policy and much more technical focus than I had working in litigation cases at the Justice Department. So I spent 3.5 years at the Treasury Department Office of Tax Policy, working on regulatory matters, working on legislative matters, advancing the administration's tax priorities with Congress and the tax writing committees, and had a great experience there. I expected in 2008 that there would be a change in administration, that things would be very quiet as we rolled into the election at the end of 2008. And so I decided to go back into private practice, not realizing that with the economic downturn in 2008, the world was going to be turned somewhat upside down later that year as I went into private practice. So I did spend a little bit more time in private practice back at my old firm. And after a couple of years at that and a merger or two with the firm, realized that I really wanted to find an opportunity to pursue and work on the kinds of cases, just a wide variety of cases and some different work than you really see at big firms. So I started my own law practice and moved back to California and started that practice out there and did that for 6 years, and had a great experience representing a wide variety of taxpayers, mostly in controversy matters, but also some tax planning and some consulting work. And then again, somewhat unexpectedly had the opportunity in 2018 when I was nominated to be Chief Counsel of the IRS. So this job, I've been here for 18 months now, really pulls together a number of threads from throughout my career, both on the controversy and litigation side. We've got 6 divisions that litigate cases in tax court around the country and advise field agents and examiners on audits that they're doing. So we've got a lot of controversy work that we do. And then we also have 6 technical divisions here in Washington that focus on new legislation and answering questions under old statutes through regulations and published guidance. So a total of about 1,500 attorneys and 2,000 employees in the Office of Chief Counsel, covering every nook and cranny of the tax law, both, as I said, on the litigation and controversy side, and also on the guidance and regulatory side. So really a great opportunity for me to have a strong team of people, as I said, covering just about every issue you can imagine under the tax law. So 18 months in, we're still going, waiting for the next step from Congress, and maybe we'll hear more about what legislation may be coming our way in the next few weeks in response to the COVID pandemic. But it's been a great opportunity, and look forward to talking to all of you some more this afternoon. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Ms. Smith?
Good afternoon. My career actually follows Judge Foley's a little bit. I did not have an interest in tax until I got to law school. And I took several law classes, corporate tax, federal income tax, while I was at the University of Illinois getting my law degree. I then went to work for the City of Chicago Department of Law, working on city ordinances, doing both transactional and litigation in the, it was our tax group. So Chicago has its own taxes, both relating to the airport, sales tax, use taxes, maritime taxes because of the lake. So that's where I started my career. Once I moved out east, I started working at the IRS in the national office. I worked for procedure and administration, working on issues relating to claims for refund, tax returns, information reporting, interest. We coordinated a lot with different offices. We provided litigation support to the Department of Justice. We provided litigation support to our local offices, small business, large business, tax exempt and government entities. We also provided support to the IRS directly, not just the Chief Counsel's office. So I worked there for about 6 years. And then I got to go to Capitol Hill on the Senate Finance Committee's Democratic staff through a fellowship. And I was a fellow at the Senate Finance Committee for 7 months doing various things. As a staffer, I worked on immigration. I worked on any issues that folks would give me work on. And in 2006, after the election, the Senate flipped and they got the ability to hire, and they hired me on as tax counsel for the Senate Finance Committee Democratic staff. To date, I've been there now on the Hill 14 years, and I'm Chief Tax Counsel for the Finance Committee's Democratic staff. I have a staff of, there's a total of 9 of us. We work a lot with Treasury Department. We work a lot with the IRS. They provide us technical advice and on legislation. We've actually been asking them a lot about how some of the programs that we've implemented that we passed for CARES have been working, since we are probably going into another round of possible tax policy changes for dealing with COVID. We do have on our staff attorneys, accountants, and some economists and some non-attorneys. So our staff actually varies. We handle all areas of the tax code. We also handle nominations for the Treasury Department and the IRS that come through our committee, so we review those. I actually met Judge Foley through the nomination process. I met Michael Desmond as a tax staffer on the Hill when he was at Treasury. So we deal a lot with the different agencies. We do a lot, and we have, of course, we do policy. We do get very technical as we are drafting the legislative language and looking at how it's going to be administered and whether it can work or not. So that's a little bit of my background.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Erbsen?
Hi, thanks for including me on this panel. I initially was thinking how exciting it was to have such a diverse panel until we started speaking. And I too follow Judge Foley's model and Michael Desmond and Tiffany Smith a little less, but I became interested in tax law right after college when I worked on the Hill for the Senate Finance Committee, where Chief Judge Foley was then on the tax staff. And I thought at that point, I started as a receptionist right after college and then moved on to the Health and Income Security staff, and realized very quickly that one can't really fund health and income security programs without the revenue from tax, and that in order to generate that revenue, it was important to understand the code and the policy behind the code. So like Chief Judge Foley and Michael Desmond, and I think Tiffany, I was very interested in the policy aspects. And I think it's one of the things that distinguishes tax from other fields, so that when I left the Hill to go to law school, I was very interested in pursuing tax classes. I went to Northeastern Law School, which has a policy orientation, so that my tax classes were great and definitely made it clear that that was what I wanted to pursue. But I went and got an LLM at NYU to get more of a background in the substantive tax law. And somebody had raised a question on the chat about whether that's a helpful thing. I do think that's a helpful thing, and to get an LLM, and particularly in this time when we're faced with lots of challenges. I think in terms of our work scenario, working at home, that would be something that I would strongly consider if I were a student thinking about a career in tax law. Or if I was a young lawyer in another field, I would think about an LLM. I think it's made my experience in tax law much better, but it's not necessary. So I then went on to clerk at the tax court, and I think that's also a great opportunity. I think what you've heard from everyone so far, and I think you will continue to hear, is that we've all moved around quite a bit to different aspects of practice. And I think that benefits one's perspective and strengthens one's view and one's advocacy wherever one is. I went from the court to what was then a small firm of 60 or so attorneys, and that firm dissolved, and I moved over to what was then a big firm of about 400 attorneys. DLA Piper is now about 4,000 plus attorneys. So we are a huge firm, and I love where I am. I love the work that I do, work with a range of clients. Again, one of the things that I think you're hearing, whether you're a student or a young lawyer, is to really try to find your place. And every place is not going to be the right place for every single lawyer. So if you have the opportunity to try different things, particularly as a young lawyer, you benefit in a lot of different ways. I was very happily practicing as a partner at DLA when I had an opportunity to go to the Justice Department in the last administration, where I was a Deputy Assistant Attorney General for appellate and review in the tax division, which is part of the leadership of the Justice Department tax division. And so again, was able to see the practice from the government perspective, from a more senior perspective than either when I was starting out at the Senate Finance Committee or starting out at the tax court. And, you know, to really get a sense of the government, the way the government works and the way decisions are made was a terrific opportunity, an opportunity for me to give back, to be involved in advocating for the government and sound tax policy, and is also helpful to me now that I'm back in private practice to have an understanding of, or a better understanding of, how the government operates. So, so that's my story.
Great, thank you. Mr. Kugelman?
All right, well, good morning from California. You know, my background is not as spectacular as the other speakers, but I went to University of Colorado as an English Lit major, traveled for 3 years, and then went to law school at Chapman University. I had kind of the same misconception of tax law when I started there. I thought it was for accountants, kind of nerdy type of stuff, and I was more interested in the flashier areas of law. And at Chapman, they have a federal income tax or an income tax emphasis, and they require federal income tax. And I did pretty well in federal income tax. I liked it, but I still didn't pursue it. You know, I was going to do litigation, so I was fortunate enough to get a district court clerkship in Michigan. Did that for a couple of years, and then I went and did civil litigation, and I realized what that really meant, and it was soul crushing. And my friends who I went to school with, a couple of them had clerked at the tax court, and kind of encouraged me, so I applied. Fortunate enough to get a clerkship, and really enjoyed tax law, and kind of got a backdoor into it. But what the other speakers are saying about, I had a total misconception of what it was about. And then coming out of the clerkship, I had a decision on what I wanted to do career path-wise. And while I love, 100 degrees and 100% humidity of Washington, D.C. in the summers, I was ready to go back to California. And so I had another friend who at that time started a practice. And so I started working with him, and that got me off the ground, and that's the solo practice, or the small firm practice that I have now. I've been doing that for 6 years. I love it. And, a really good, really fun area. Love my clients, very interesting issues. So a very good kind of practice area for a small practitioner.
Thank you. And Ms. Sellier?
Yeah, sure. So I'll shake it up a little bit. So I actually became intrigued with taxes when I was about 8 years old, maybe 7. So I wanted to buy this surfboard, and it was so nice. If there's any surfers out there, it was the 6'6" fun-shaped local motion board. It was bright yellow. It was gorgeous. So I started a car washing business, and I washed all these cars, and I finally had $400. That's how much this board cost. So my dad took me to the surf shop, got there. Turns out the fins didn't come with the board, so I didn't have enough money. So my dad's like, oh, well, guess you gotta go wash more cars. So I go back out there, wash more cars, finally have enough money to buy the surfboard with the fins, with the leash. We get there, we get to the counter. Now I don't have enough money to pay sales tax. And so I've been trying to figure out taxes ever since then, really. So I actually, I did go back, wash another car, came back. My dad would not front me the money. We had to go back, wash cars, finally got my surfboard. But then fast forward, I went, I actually did study accounting in undergrad at University of Miami. And I got there just in time for them to be really bad at football. And now they're kind of like a basketball school, which is kind of weird, but still love them. Went to law school after that. And I'm also a CPA, so I was playing around with the idea of an LLM, but I was kind of like going back and forth saying, well, JD CPA, do I really need, an LLM? Do I really need more student loans? So I was thinking probably leaning towards the no, but I put a few applications out there just to see what happened. Got into NYU. I didn't really want to go because it was too cold. So I told my mom and dad, I'm like, yeah, like I know it's like a good school and all of that, but it's just too cold. So I think I'm good. And my dad's like, you're going to buy a coat and you're going to go to New York. So I went to NYU, got my LLM. While I was getting my LLM, I actually did see a question pop up in the chat while someone else was talking about, going for 1 year full-time right after, or part-time, or working and then, going back for your LLM. I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer. I think it's whatever works personally for me. It took me about 1.5 years to do it because I was working full-time, and I started working at the public accounting firm that I work for now while I was doing that. And that was great because it let me get some experience, I guess, with more of like the numbers, I guess I'll say. So I got a little tax court experience sort of when I was in law school. I was working for the tax clinic at my school, and I was always sort of like conceptually unsatisfied, or I couldn't connect the dots between, the law and then what does that mean? Like, how does that hit the tax return? Like, where does that run through? Like, what's the bigger picture? And so I initially went into an internship with a public accounting firm because I was trying to sort of fill in that gap. And then I wasn't sure what I was going to do after that. But then while I was there, they, introduced me to their Washington national office, and I ended up loving it. And so I didn't always know I was going to go into a public accounting career, but once I got there, I loved it. And that's where I'm at now. I work in the Washington National Tax Office at a public accounting firm. And it's a pretty exciting place to be. It's, it's not the only place to be if you go to public accounting with a law degree. But, in terms of what's going on at the firm, the most technically complex, the highest risk things in terms of tax, that's all running through Washington National. That's where I'm at. And it's kind of interesting too, because my career has been a little cyclical. It's kind of coming a little bit through a cycle. So when I first started, it was about 2010, and we were coming out of the recession. So when I first started, I was doing a lot of debt cancellations, debt workouts, bad debt, bankruptcies. And then it kind of shifted towards more strategic type transactions, more strategic use of tax attributes. And now, I'm doing a lot of significant modifications. I'm doing a lot of debt workouts, a lot of debt transactions. So it's kind of interesting. It's coming a little cyclical right now.
Great, thank you. So I think we've gotten this question from a few people. I know we've heard from a few of you, but in terms of getting an LLM or coursework versus practical experience, what are some of the thoughts on, is an LLM necessary, or what would you recommend to someone who's maybe on the fence about it? Anyone, go ahead.
This is Mike. I think a couple of people have commented, and I know some of our panelists do have LLMs. I will just weigh in, not with the counterpoint necessarily, but just to say I don't have an LLM. And I have taken a number of courses. I think when I came out of law school, I'd taken 2 or 3 tax courses, as I mentioned. So I did take some courses in the Georgetown LLM program that I thought were necessary to round out my interest in tax. And those were very helpful, tax accounting in particular. But I thought that was plenty for me, combined with my practical experience. It does take some time to get your LLM, particularly if you're working full time. So by the time it got around to a choice for me as to whether to pursue that, I'd been in practice for, I think, 6 or 7 years. I'd taken a total of probably 5 or 6 tax courses. And at that point in my career, it just didn't make any difference, or to me, really think of that as a way that would advance my career. So, and it hasn't since then proven to be an impediment at all. We do see lots of folks with LLMs and people with JDs. So I think it really depends on your own personal situation, what your opportunities are, what you're working on. I would certainly not see it as a necessity. It might give you a little advantage in some environments, but not necessarily. So really, I think it depends on your own personal situation, if you've got the flexibility, the time, and the interest. So I just kind of give a counterpoint for somebody who doesn't have an LLM.
Yeah, I agree with Mike that it is a personal decision. You have to kind of gauge your own situation. I'll give you a little bit of insight into my thinking on it though. When I was just coming out of actually college, when I graduated from college, I was going to get a JD MBA, and I wanted to focus on tax. And then I talked to people who were actually in the tax field, and they discouraged me from getting an MBA because they said, you really don't want to learn about finance and accounting and marketing and all that stuff, and I didn't. So I decided to get an LLM largely because when I left, got out of school, I wanted to provide myself with as many opportunities as possible, and I wanted to have the maximum amount of flexibility, and I never wanted to have anyone be able to kind of point out, well, if you only had this, then you would be eligible for that job. So I immediately pursued the LLM, and I did it while I was working at the IRS, which a lot of people do. Because at that point, after graduating from law school, I didn't really want to go to work full time, and I found that working in tax and also getting the LLM was a really good combination, because at the IRS I was really focused in on a really narrow area of the law, generation skipping transfer taxes and things like that. And then at the LLM program, I got a chance to really expand and learn a little bit about everything. And that really helped me when I went to the Senate Finance Committee, because when I got there, I had very broad jurisdiction over a wide number of things, as Tiffany could probably attest to. So I had, I had to deal with individual tax issues. I had to deal with penalties. I had to deal with exempt organizations, capital gains, all this stuff. And the LLM really provided me with a broad knowledge of many different areas, and I found it very helpful. Now at the tax court, for tax court clerks, there are judges who hire folks who don't have LLMs, but many of the judges, probably more than half of them, do hire folks with LLMs. Some of them exclusively. So that's something to keep in mind also.
Yeah, I don't have an LLM, but I mean, my recommendation, I'd probably push people more towards it. I mean, I when I was in DC, I was kind of amazed, for people that were at Georgetown, for example. I mean, they had this built-in network, and if they knew a few people, then they knew people at Treasury or knew people at the tax court or all the firms. And I think, that alone is a really, especially if you can get to DC or get to NYU, I think you really have some great connections built. And then I think the second part of it is that, tax is really complicated, and if you don't have, let's say you don't have an account, you didn't get an accounting degree as an undergrad, there's just a whole bunch of different areas. And if you don't have one, like I didn't, I have to kind of either learn it on the fly or I have to rely on people that do have that kind of expertise. So I think there's a lot of benefit to having it.
I'm going to, if I can, just make a quick recruiting pitch for the Chief Counsel's office. And I don't know, Chief Judge Foley, if you were able to benefit from this program, but we used to have a partnership with NYU for an LLM program where when you worked for Chief Counsel, you were able to take advantage of that. And that transitioned into Georgetown. And then during the time of budget cuts, we were unfortunately not able to keep that program going. We have, though, just in the last few months, reinitiated that. And actually, we're developing within Chief Counsel and leaning on a lot of the experience that we have in the office, developing our own, what we're calling now the Scholars Program, which will mirror in many ways what an LLM program is. And as I said, lean on a number of counsel attorneys to be teaching those courses and putting a curriculum together. So we're trying to get that known out there and use that a bit of a recruiting tool for us. I think, as Chief Judge Foley said, and others, if you come in, particularly as a younger attorney straight out of law school, it can be a real advantage. And I think I would echo Chief Judge Foley's comments about a lot of our attorneys go into a very discrete area of the tax law. So we're working to provide that broader opportunity here. So there is certainly some advantage for people, as I said, in that position in your career and in your life.
I actually did take the NYU course when I was at the IRS Office of Chief Counsel. And I went to Georgetown to get my LLM to expand my area of tax, being in procedure and administration. And when you go into Chief Counsel, you are very focused on a certain particular area. So I felt that it was, I think I had been there 3 or 4 years when I decided to get my LLM, but I did use and take the NYU courses, and they were pretty good because we didn't have to necessarily leave the building. They were right there. And so it was helpful, and they were a way to expand your knowledge of tax. And I found that when I came to Finance Committee, having my LLM was helpful because our portfolios are actually quite broader. I've actually now, being on the Finance Committee, have touched almost every area of tax as my portfolio has changed over the years. I don't think you have to have an LLM. As I stated, we have people on staff that are not attorneys and know their areas very well. And we have folks who are accountants and economists. So it just depends on where you want your career to go, or how you see your career developing, and what you need to support your tax knowledge.
And one thing to keep in mind is that and all of you have said this, but the tax law is so broad, and when you're early in your career, you really don't know where you're going to end up. So it's good to have I think it's good to have kind of a broad knowledge of the field, so that you so that you're prepared, regardless of what the circumstances are. And again, in an LLM program, you're not going to become a tax expert. I kind of view it more of a kind of a liberal arts degree in tax. You learn a little bit about a lot of tax areas, but you don't become an expert. I developed my early tax expertise at the IRS, and so that focus that I had, I wanted to just hammer this point, that the focus that I had at the IRS was of great benefit to me at that time in my career, because it opened doors for me to do other things, because it was my expertise that I developed in the estate and gift tax that opened the door for me to go to work at the Finance Committee, because they were looking for someone with expertise in that area. But when I got to the Finance Committee, I had broader jurisdiction, so I had to be prepared for that. And had I not gotten the LLM, I would not have been as prepared. And even though there were things I had in my jurisdiction at that point, like nuclear decommissioning costs, all that kind of stuff, that just a lot of strange things that I had never looked at, but I at least I had the confidence to pick up and learn things that I knew nothing about, and I became comfortable doing that. Let me put in a little plug too for recruiting purposes. The task force having a kind of a virtual version of its law clerk interview day between September 8th and September 11th. And we're actually working with 40 different law school career services. But even if you're not at a law school that we've been working with, you can submit your applications electronically on our website. And the portal will open on August 3rd and it'll close on August 10th. And you have to have a cover letter, resume, writing sample of no longer than 10 pages, and your transcripts. And once the application is received, it'll be forwarded to a judge. And like I said, some judges prefer LLM candidates. Some will hire JD candidates. But each chambers is going to start scheduling virtual interviews for the September 8th through 11th period. In August. So around August 10th, they'll be notifying people. And one other thing I'd like to mention, that I know many of you are students, but there may be some folks who have graduated and have a few years of experience. We also will soon have a vacancy announcement advertising for counsel to the chief judge. I have several tax attorneys who review opinions. So one of my jobs as chief judges, I have to read and review all of the opinions that the judges write, and I have to decide whether they're a memorandum opinion, which is not precedential, or a division of opinion, which is actually precedential. And I also have to decide whether there's a controversy that's significant enough for all of the judges to look at. And that typically happens when we have a split in the circuits, or we have a regulation that we're trying to determine whether it's valid or not. those are things that automatically go to court conference. So part of my review process is making that determination. And in doing that, I have a crew of attorneys who will review the opinions and make a recommendation to me. So one of our counsels is actually has been nominated to be a judge in the court. So there's an opening there. I'm not going to say that it's a pathway to becoming a tax court judge, but I will say that it's a very, very interesting job. So so that job will be posted at USA Jobs probably in a week or so. And again, the primary responsibility is to review opinions, to check their technical accuracy and their consistency with other tax court precedents. So that'll be on USA Jobs probably next week. And any questions that you have, you can direct to our personnel office. Great.
I want to circle back to some of the finding a job and some of that as well, especially given the current circumstances with the pandemic. But we have had a couple of questions about sort of the dynamic between law and accounting. And so I'm going to put Ms. Sellier on the spot here and ask, what are your thoughts on if you qualify to sit for the CPA license versus an LLM? How do those sort of interplay?
So if you qualify to sit for the CPA exam, I would say go for it. I would, in terms of comparing the LLM designation or degree to the CPA, CPA is more of a designation, I think, has been my experience. People like to see it. Clients like to see it. Clients like that I'm a CPA, but I don't like fall back on it the same way that I have my LLM. I will tell you, I have people that I work with joke, they call it my $100,000 flash drive. And it's like all my notes from NYU. And every now and then, like some weird issues come up and I'll like put it in and just do some Control F. And sometimes I find that revenue ruling or that PLR a lot faster that way. So that would be the main difference. And it still falls into the category of great to have. It's not going to hurt you. Definitely can help you, but you don't absolutely need to get your CPA.
Thank you. And so to follow up on what we were discussing a little bit earlier, just I think a lot of students and young attorneys especially are concerned now about sort of the change in environment with starting jobs remotely, working remotely. What are some of your thoughts on that? Advice on getting your foot in the door, or advice on if you're new and you're starting a job remotely?
Well, I think a lot has obviously changed over the last few months. One thing that has changed is how many people are at home and not traveling, are more accessible. So I think take advantage of that and send emails if you're interested in learning more about somebody's practice. Send an email. If you don't get a response, it's not necessarily because they don't want to talk to you. It may be that they missed the email. I'm not saying to stalk anybody, but you know, if somebody doesn't respond on the first email, I wouldn't assume that they're not being responsive. I would assume that they had other things to do that day and lost track of it, and maybe just follow, you know, give a second chance. So I think that's, you know, one of the things we're hearing a lot at this point is about creating opportunity in a challenging time. And that is one way to create opportunity for yourself. One thing I would just add that I didn't say before is that I work in the controversy area. So what I do is represent taxpayers in conflicts with the government, generally speaking. That's sort of a broad brush statement. There are lots of ways to practice tax law. And again, one of the ways to find out what you like the most is to talk to people and find out what what their job actually entails. Do they work with individuals? Do they work with policy? Do they mostly work with numbers? Do they work with big corporations? Do they work with closely held companies? Are they interacting with individuals on their own behalf or individuals representing other people? And that's something that, as we're all, or most of us are getting more accustomed to Zoom, can be done in a 15-minute, 10-minute chat. Whereas before you had to get on somebody's calendar, you had to go into the office. It had to be, you know, more of a production. So I would encourage people to do that. And I just want to say two more things. One is what I didn't say about the finance committee experience was that one of the reasons that, in addition to the policy reason for pursuing tax law, I also thought the tax lawyers were by far the most fun group of people I encountered. And Chief Judge Foley was there as one of the fun tax lawyers at the time. So thank you, Chief Judge Foley. Yeah. The other thing is that I'm hoping that at some point in the near future, we will be looking for another controversy associate. So keep your eyes open for that posting. We had posted it before the pandemic, but had to withdraw it. And we're always looking for tax lawyers. So keep your eyes open. Thanks.
I would just encourage folks not to be intimidated by the fact that now things are, everybody's doing things virtually, because I think it really is there are some opportunities that will present themselves now that didn't present themselves before. For example, I was always reluctant to hire folks from the West Coast because I wanted to interview them and I didn't want them to have to pay to fly out to Washington, D.C. for what might not be a successful trip. But now, the tax court's interviewing people from all over the country, and we can do that virtually, and everybody's more comfortable doing it now. So we're going to be hiring folks, throughout the pandemic, because we need clerks, and you're going to have an opportunity to interview at the court no matter where you are in the country, and I think that you can, and you'll be able to do it with no expense. So I think that there are opportunities that are presented during these times where you can really take it. You can really take advantage. You can really take advantage of it. So don't be intimidated. Don't be intimidated by it. There was one question I saw in the chat about law school ranking, and I'll just say that that's something I have never paid any attention to. That hasn't factored at all in my decision-making process in terms of hiring clerks. Now I'm one of the judges who tend to hire clerks with LLMs. So in my 25 years, I've hired 2 clerks who did not have LLMs, but most of them had LLMs. And I didn't pay any attention to their law school ranking. I paid attention to how they did in law school, but what I really focused on was their writing ability, their analytical ability, and whether I thought that we could connect and they'd be kind of good learners and good listeners. So those were the things that I focused on. So I wouldn't agonize over law school ranking and even GPAs. I make sure people have done well, but I never had some cutoff where people had to have a certain GPA in order to be acceptable. I do have some quirks though. If somebody sends me a cover letter with typos and grammatical errors in it, it goes in the garbage can. I don't even see it. I've told my clerks I don't even want to see it, because if folks aren't careful enough to send me a carefully written and well-written cover letter, then I don't want them writing draft opinions for me. It's just that simple. So little things like that make a big difference. But if you're in a law school, you're not at the ranking. Just do well at the law school.
Thank you. We've had a couple of questions as well about the job market. So I'm going to ask kind of a different question, but especially now, given people might be worried about opportunities, what are your thoughts on, if you've had your heart set on a specific substantive area or going to either an accounting firm or the tax court or something, what are your thoughts on, I guess, being too tied to a certain area? Or what are your thoughts on being open, or how can people maybe find something else that interests them?
Well, I will say this about being tied to a particular area. Some folks who get LLMs, I see a lot of LLM candidates who have specialized in a particular area. So they'll take an LLM program where I think you take a total of 12 classes, and 6 of them or 5 of them will be in one area: international tax or state tax or employee plans. Well, if you know that's what you want to do, that's fine. But if you are kind of early on in your career, I advise folks not to do that. I advise folks to take a variety of classes and not specialize, because you come to the tax court and you've got 6 classes in international tax, and you may never see an international tax case. And when you spend $70,000 for a degree, you really should try and get a broad sampling of a lot of different areas. So I think early on in a career, it makes sense. There are the rare people who know exactly what they want to do, but early on in your career, I think you have to lay a broad foundation so that you can take on any number of tax issues and tax problems in a wide variety of areas.
I'd add to Chief Judge Foley's comments, and I think part of that question was geared toward what would somebody want to do to try to anticipate where the market might be. So, and I think Brianne mentioned earlier, coming out of law school in 2010 or looking for a job in 2010, and in a downturn in the market. And I think sometimes law students and even attorneys try to see where the market's going to go, and maybe that will help. If they focus on bankruptcy in a down market, maybe that will make them more marketable. I would discourage people from doing that, because I think that's going to take you toward an area you may not really be interested in. And it's also really hard, if not impossible, to predict where things are going to go. Right now we're in an economic downturn for reasons that nobody could have remotely predicted in January. So to try to kind of go down a path of bankruptcy or planning because you think that's where the market's going to go, I think is a mistake. Really kind of find an area that interests you. And if you get, a job at a firm or in an accounting firm or a chief counsel that has you working in a very discrete area of law, there's a chance that you may become the world-renowned expert in that area of law, and that might be, what your calling is. More likely, it's probably something that you'll specialize in for a short period of time. And if you can expand your horizon, take courses, get an LLM, find other opportunities to see what interests you, and really pursue an area of law and the tax law that interests you, be it litigation or, particularly early in your career. Find things that interest you, not try to foresee where the market's going to go to try to improve your chances of getting a job. If you're good at what you do, somebody will find you. Don't try to peg where the market's going to go in order to improve your chances. Just be really good at what you do and embrace what you've been asked to do, and that's probably the best advice for people starting out.
Yeah, definitely. And I would just say there are areas of tax law that you don't even know exist. I mean, like the things that I've done in my career, I like research credit studies. Like I know a lot about really weird things from some of like the tax cases I've had to build. And so, sometimes that's how the opportunities, come up. And so Michael's advice is spot on. And because I think, they always say like, do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I mean, I think it's actually like the opposite, right? Because anything worth doing, anything worth having takes work. And so it's like, you need to love it enough. You need to like it enough to show up, keep showing up and keep doing the work. So the best thing you can do is find your niche, like find out what practice areas interest you, find out what practice settings interest you, and do that. And if you do that, you'll be successful ultimately.
Yeah, and a good example of that is when I was at the finance committee, one of the things that was in my portfolio was the earned income tax credit. And I just really loved working on it. So I developed some expertise in the earned income tax credit. And then when I went to the Treasury Department, the first week I was there, the Treasury Secretary called me up and he said, we have to go over to the Oval Office to talk about the earned income tax credit with the president. And so I'm there on the job for a week, and I'm going over to the Oval Office to discuss the earned income tax credit with the Secretary of Treasury, the Secretary of Labor, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and the Director of OMB, the President and the Vice President, to talk about the earned income tax credit, which was something that nobody on the staff was fighting for, because everybody knew that you're not going to get a job in big law, with expertise in the earned income tax credit. Right. But that's not what concerned me. What concerned me was it was something that was interesting to me. Yeah. And it was something that affected people that I really cared about. So I enjoyed working on it. And I remember going over to the White House, and my colleagues were like, what is he going over to the White House for? And I'm like, the earned income tax credit? What does the president want to know about that for? So, I was put on a task force. I learned all about income security with all these welfare reform experts, and I was on the welfare reform task force. And it was very, very interesting stuff. But it wasn't because I had kind of gauged where the market was going and tried to position myself so I could be in a certain place. I found something that I really liked, and I worked hard on it. And things just happened.
That's it. Yeah. And I mean, even right now with the market, there's a downturn, there's a lot of uncertainty, but also it's a really exciting time to be practicing right now. And, if you think of it differently, even with TCJA, I really advanced my career during that process, because at some level, everyone was equally inexperienced in that. It's not anymore the 1986 Internal Revenue Code. And, now we've got the CARES Act, and now we've got sort of this new working environment. So everyone is kind of trying to figure it out in real time. So it kind of, in some ways, levels the playing field, I feel like, for people that are trying to get a foot in. So the opportunities, I think, are there. And, it's like we said, I think just find what you like, because you have to love it enough to keep doing the work, because, there will be work, but it'll be worth it.
So thank you. So one question I want to ask is, how did each of you find your mentors? And I want to start with Mr. Kugelman as our solo practitioner representative. Sorry again to put you on the spot, but.
Yeah, no, I guess part of it is, you develop mentors as through your working career. You kind of gravitate to people that you like and people that are willing to help you, right? So being open to opportunity, I think, is really important. And I think also, I think if you're trying to develop where you're going to be in 30 years, I think that's not really a fruitful enterprise, right? I think what Judge Foley is saying about what's in front of you and doing really well at that, and people recognize that, and there's a lot of people, the people on this panel, right? They're trying to encourage other people to get into it, and they want to be helpful. So there's a certain camaraderie within the tax field that I really like. And I go to ABA conferences, even though I pay for them out of my pocket, because I like seeing people, and people are very, very helpful. It's a good place. I met the chief counsel at an ABA conference, and that's kind of cool. And there's not many areas of law where you kind of know everybody nationally, or can get to know everybody nationally that easy. So I would say being involved is really, really important, and just actually really working hard and being concerned about your work product.
I guess I would say also that I would echo what Alex is saying about going to ABA meetings and other professional organization meetings, and not just going, but getting involved. I think just going doesn't really do that much for you, but I think getting involved gives you an opportunity, again, to gauge what things you like, what things you love, what kind of circumstances you enjoy working in, what are the topics that are of interest. Are you enjoying being on panels? Are you enjoying writing comments? Are you, again, what kind of substantive law are you interested in? And the ABA tax section really gives you that opportunity to explore and experience and engage And the Young Lawyers Forum puts together programs that to reach directly to young lawyers and give them opportunities that they might not otherwise have. So I think there are also multiple kinds of mentors. There are the mentors who find you and who recognize the work you're doing. You know, Judge Arman, who recently retired from the court, was one of my my most treasured, significant mentors, and continues to be a mentor. And you know, that was something where, you know, I guess we found each other. I was his first law clerk, and I interviewed with him thanks to somebody, to Leandra Letterman, who was already clerking at the court, reached out to me while I was at the LLM program working at Morrison and Forster, and said, look, I know you like New York, I know you like what you're doing, but I think you would love this judge. And you're interested in public service, you're interested in policy, why don't you talk to him? And so that really, again, as Judge Foley is saying, that guided my career in that way. And then before that, when I was trying to decide, and this goes to the idea of you can't plan ahead, when I was trying to decide whether to get my LLM at NYU or Georgetown, I really wanted to be in New York. I really wanted to study with Marty Ginsburg, who was at Georgetown. And I decided ultimately to stay at NYU, and Marty Ginsburg ended up spending the year that I was at NYU rather than Georgetown. So I tagged along, you know, like a little puppy dog and he ended up being one of my mentors as well, and was amazing. He practiced in the corporate tax area and was very influential in both providing a outlook, perspective, introductions, all sorts of things. So, you know, you find mentors in multiple different places in multiple different ways. Sometimes they find you, sometimes you find them.
Great, thank you. I do want to ask one specific question, and we've got about 10 minutes. And so to maybe finish off, want to know, what is one piece of advice that either you received and stuck with you, or that you wish you had gotten when you were first starting out? And Ms. Smith, I'd like to start with you.
The one thing, and this has nothing to do necessarily with tax. Well, the first thing I was told when I started working at the city of Chicago is it's a good idea to return emails within 24 hours. Even if you're not answering the email, you're responding that you got it. And to this day, it's something I still try to do. I have a lot more emails now, but it's more about acknowledging people and making a connection. A lot of my job is relationships. We interact a lot with the community, with constituents, with our coworkers, with other members' offices. And so it is a lot about building relationships. And as Michael has said, and Judge Foley and Alex, you should be doing a good job. And part of your good job is being responsive. And that's one of the things I've taken throughout my career, on being responsive. Even if I'm not responding and giving you an answer, I'm letting you know that I haven't forgotten. I've gotten your question. I will get to it. I am looking into it. Because a lot of what we do is about relationships and building relationships and the flow back and forth of information.
Thank you. Mr. Sellier?
I would just say don't be afraid to ask questions, and you know, don't be afraid to reach out. Like some of the other panelists were saying, you know, we love to hear from you guys. Just if you send us an email and we don't answer right away, maybe we didn't see it. It's not that we don't want to talk to you, but you know, make connections and definitely ask questions. I always go back to a funny thing that happened to me, like when I first started working at the firm I'm working at, someone told me, some of the other guys on this panel can probably appreciate this, hey, can you prepare a zero extension? And I'm like, what is that? I'm like Googling like zero extension, nothing. I don't know, let me see if it's on my NYU flash drive. No. And so finally I spent like hours Googling what's a zero extension. It's a tax extension that literally says none on it because there's no tax due. And so, you know, a lot of the questions that you think are stupid are probably not, like you have no reason to know, and just ask questions. That's people are happy to answer them.
And Mr. Kugelman?
You know, the piece of advice that I got when I was coming out of the tax court from one of my mentors was when I told him that I was going to go on my own or join someone to do a small practice, he kind of said to me, you know, you should probably try to go to government first. You can always start your own practice. Now, I didn't listen to that advice, but I think it is good advice. And I'm glad I disregarded it because it's worked out well for me. But as I think you can see from the panelists here, people have really impressive backgrounds and have touched in different pieces of tax. So I think if you kind of get into that pipeline, you can start to try, and I've seen some questions about, you know, big four firms or big law or treasury. I think once you start to know people and start working and do a good job, I think a lot of opportunities do open up, and especially if you are in DC or New York. So I think being open to different opportunities in those locations is a really good idea.
I think that this is not so much about tax specifically, but try to take opportunities from challenges, and in those challenges I would include mistakes, learn from mistakes. One of the most stressful experiences I've ever had working was many years ago when I had a summer job in law school, and I mean, I can still feel the horror of it. It was before Google, before thumb drives, and I had done a huge amount of research on a memo, realized that I had written an entire memo, which was very good, but came to the completely wrong conclusion because it was overturned by a Supreme Court case. So I stayed up all night long revising the memo to reflect the Supreme Court case and the subsequent opinions, but I was able to, I think, make the memo stronger by referencing all that preceded it. Now, if I had done the whole thing correctly, I probably would have just started at the Supreme Court case going forward and would have missed a lot of the depth in being able to discuss the background. I would have gotten another night's sleep and I wouldn't remember with terror my experience. But that's an example where I could have been up all night crying and instead really tried to rework the memo and make it better. And I think that we all have those kinds of horrible experiences. And so my recommendation is when you're in the midst of a horrible experience like that, try to think, how can I make this better? Rather than, oh my goodness, I'm never gonna work again.
Thank you. Mr. Desmond?
Yeah, I'd give a piece of advice I think that I learned very early. This is probably in one of my summer jobs in high school, which is to never be limited by your job description. And in particular, don't think that any task is beneath you. Always express a willingness to do what needs to be done to get a project done. I think the attorneys and everyone I've ever worked with, the people that have most impressed me have been people that will do what needs to be done to get something done. Whatever the goal is that needs to be done, I think oftentimes attorneys come out of law school with their degrees and their credentials, but oftentimes, when things are really challenging, work needs to be done that's beyond the four corners of your job description. You're going to be at work late at night and on weekends, and a trial's coming up. Copies need to be made. Doesn't matter if you're a partner at a law firm with an Ivy League degree. That job needs to get done. And I think if you can express a willingness very early in your career to do what needs to be done, and if you're not the expert in a particular subject matter area, or you think you're the attorney and the paralegal work is not something that's in your job description, that's going to hinder your opportunities for growth. I think that a lot of us probably on this call see folks that are willing to get a job done, regardless of what their job description is, as being the kind of people that we want to associate ourselves with. Because we have a mission in mind, we have a goal, we have an accomplishment, we have a task, and anyone who wants to join that team and move things forward, those are the kinds of people that we want to be around. So don't be limited by your job description.
Thank you. And Chief Judge Foley?
Yeah, I mean, my advice is very similar to what Chief Counsel Desmond just said. Be willing to work very, very hard, and focus on the task that's right in front of you. I grew up hearing a story from my father who before he went to elementary school, he had to take a mule and wagon around the neighborhood to collect scraps so that he could go out and feed the pigs before he went to school. So I heard that story over and over and over again. So I could never complain about chores around the house because I had to hear that story. But it was important to me because it let me know just how important it is to work hard. And so I've never complained about hard work. You just do what's in front of you and you focus on what's in front of you. And what a lot of young people do is they're so busy planning what the next step is going to be that they're not really focusing and digging in and doing all that they need to do to finish the job that's in front of them. And the other thing that has been important for me, and I think is important for everyone, is that you're going to have failure. And when you fail at something, you can't let it destroy you. You have to learn from it, and you have to get up, and you have to keep going forward. So don't let failure be an obstacle. It can be a speed bump, slow you down, but you have to move forward even when there's failure, and be willing to accept help from people. So I've throughout my career I've reached out to a lot of people who I didn't even know, who took out just a little bit of time to provide me with some words of advice, and that has really helped me throughout my career. So don't think that everybody you get in contact with and you talk to, you're going to get a job from, because oftentimes what you're going to get from that person is a little bit of wisdom that's going to provide you with some direction, and value that. So I really have an open door policy. So there's some people who have some questions in the chat that may not be able to be answered during this process. So contact me and I'll take the time out and answer them individually.
Great, thank you. And I think that is our time. So I want to again thank each of our panelists for taking the time today, and for your wisdom and your experience and your advice. And I know everyone has a lot of questions, so I just encourage everybody to keep asking those questions, reach out to people, find people on LinkedIn or emails or however you do that. And most importantly, everyone stay safe and take care. Okay. Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you.